learn something say we can't know anything. When they're coming here to try to learn things that they can know. It seems so absurd to me. I was blown away. But either way, enjoyed some great conversations. Was supposed to be out here for 2 hours. Ended up being out here for 5 hours yesterday, having great conversations. Really enjoyed it. Today's topic is why evolution is dead. Now, just so you know a little bit about me, my name is Eric. I am from Pensacola, Florida, and I have been for the last 20 years now speaking on the subject of creation and evolution. How do we know God really created the heavens and the earth? And in secular campuses and in secular schools, public schools across America right now, they're teaching the idea that man evolved over millions of years, and they're teaching it as if it's a scientific fact. When in reality, ever since Darwin, the science has continually undermined everything Darwin tried to say about the origin of the species. And I want to try to present some of the science to you and then take some Q&A and find out what your thoughts are about this. So why evolution is dead. All right, that's what we're going to try to cover. Some people look at this world and they think, wow, it's amazing. A Big Bang made this world from absolutely nothing. This is called the humanist or an evolutionary worldview. The idea that nothing created us, we just evolved and the universe came into existence all by itself. Other people say, like me, I would say no. This world is incredibly designed. God is an amazing designer. To deny that somebody designed this world would be like trying to deny that somebody designed this building. We are fearfully and we are wonderfully made. We are incredibly made. Now, are we on the downhill slope of genetics? Yes, we have problems now. But the original creation was very good. And actually, genetics is one of the fields of science that shows us that we are devolving, we are not evolving. We're not getting better, we're getting worse. It's not getting better as time goes on. You, from your parents, were passed somewhere between 100 and 300 genetic mutations. You and your future spouse are going to pass on another 100 to 300 genetic mutations. You're not going to make things better. It's going to keep on getting worse. They're not getting better. Matter of fact, John Sanford, who's invented the gene gun, he's a geneticist. He actually said, look, when I look at the amount of genetic problems in the human DNA, when we actually study all these problems, the human DNA can only go back for about 25,000 years. You can't go further than that without, that's about how much genetic, what they call genetic load we've got in the DNA of the human body right now. I look at that and I go, wow, that fits with what God teaches about creation. God says God created the heavens and the earth. The Bible says God created the heavens and the earth. And sure enough, what we have today is genetic load. Because of man's sin, we're headed downhill. We're not headed uphill, as evolution would say. Now, just to let you guys know kind of the two different worldviews, because there's two basic ones, creation and evolution. Here they are kind of on a timeline, if you can make it out. The creationist worldview says that somewhere around 6,000 years ago, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, we don't put an exact date on it, okay? Some people have tried to do that. They tried to go meticulously through historical records, biblical records, and get an exact date. And like there was a guy named Schofield that said, Adam was made October 23rd, 4004 BC at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's pretty precise. I don't think we can get that close from the Bible or from history. All we know is that Adam was made in the afternoon because it was right before Eve. That's the only clue we've discovered about that. 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. Valerie, right? Valerie and I were talking about this, how I believe the flood is what makes sense of all the geologic column that we have today. The geologic column is layers of matter, layers of sediment that was laid down by water. So here you have all these layers laid down by water around the world. A worldwide flood makes sense of why these sediments were laid down, all right? 2,000 years ago, of course, Jesus Christ was here. Lots of evidence for that, both biblical and extra-biblical. Lots of evidence showing that he really did what he claimed he was going to do. He said, I'm going to die, and I'm going to come back to life. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will lift it back up. And that's exactly what he did. He died, and 3 days later he rose again. And now here we are today, waiting for the return of Christ. This fits both biblical and even secular history, these concepts that are out there. Here's what the evolution review is. Here's what they're teaching here at the college, and you have professors teaching this concept. Somewhere between 13 and 20 billion years ago, I say 13 to 20 because it keeps on changing. 20 years ago, it was 18 billion years ago. 40 years ago, it was 20 billion years ago. 3 years ago, it was 13.4 billion years ago. 2 years ago, they changed it to 13.8 billion years ago. So they keep changing the number, but they're saying somewhere between 13 and 20 billion years ago, there was a Big Bang. Now, when you ask scientists, what exploded for the Big Bang? What actually did the booming? What banged, as Greg Kokel says? They say nothing. Nothing is what exploded. And I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what they say. Nothing exploded to create the Big Bang. They used to say it came from a singularity. A singularity meaning an infinitely small, infinitesimal object. And that object is what exploded and created all the matter that we see today. Now they're saying, with quantum mechanics and things like that, they're saying the universe can pop into and pop out of existence, which is not really consistent with quantum mechanics, but that's what they're trying to claim. Then 4.6 billion years ago, that's when this ball of dirt cooled down. So this ball of dirt is about 4.6 billion years old, according to what they're teaching here. And then for some reason, it rained on this ball of dirt for millions and millions of years. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic, I'm telling you literally what they teach. The rain from nowhere continued to rain on the earth, and it built up so much that it created the oceans. Now, I know you might be wondering, where did the rain come from? They go, listen, it just happened. The oceans are here. It had to rain. Obviously, that's what's taking place. That's about the extent of the science of it. And so they say after it rained for billions of years, it formed the oceans. The oceans mixed with the rocks and created something called soup. That is the technical name for it, soup. They call it prebiotic soup. And then 3 billion years ago, lightning struck the soup, and the soup came alive. Then it found someone to marry, found something to eat. Thankfully, soup was right there. And it continued to evolve for billions of years. And that little molecule, that little bacteria, or whatever it was that the lightning first made, even though scientifically that's impossible, that's what they believe. That little bitty molecule evolved over time, and it changed into fish. And then from fish, it changed into amphibians. And then from amphibians, it evolved into reptiles. And then from reptiles, it evolved into mammals. And then finally, here we are now, the height of mammals, human beings. This is what you get after millions of years of evolution and billions of years of evolution. If you want to remember it, it's just the word farm, F-A-R-M, fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal. Those are the stages they say we've gone through in our evolutionary history. Some people have gone so far as to make up evidence of this idea, fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal, and say that the human embryo in development in the womb repeats that process of fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal. That is an absolute farce. That is an absolute lie. If anybody ever tells you the human embryo goes through the stages of evolution, they're either ignorant and passing on ignorant information or deliberately lying to you. Now, I know why they do this. They try to say it's going through the stages of evolution because it helps justify an abortion. If it's just going through one of the stages of evolution, if it's not really a human being yet, then no big deal, we can get rid of it. They used to teach that the human embryo was actually a guy named Ernst Haeckel that came up with the drawings of the human embryo. And he drew the human embryo as having these folds of skin right here, kind of as it develops. And he said, those are gills, like when it used to be a fish. That's what they taught. Many schools are still teaching that idea today, even though that has been scientifically proven as nonsense. It is not the case. So, 3 billion years ago, life here, 3 million years ago, somewhere, the humankind, some kind of Homo sapien type species, evolved after that time. I want to read to you this quote because I think this is from an atheist, and I think he hits the nail on the head of why this subject is so important. Richard Bozart says this: Christianity has fought, still fights, and will continue to fight science to the desperate end over evolution. Because evolution destroys utterly and finally the very reason Jesus' earthly life was supposedly made necessary. This is an atheist saying this. He said, destroy Adam and Eve, the original creation idea, and the original sin, why we have death and suffering in this world. And in the rubble you will find the sorry remains of the Son of God. He said, if Jesus was not the Redeemer who died for our sins, and this is what evolution means, then Christianity is nothing. Guys, I'm here to present to you that evolution is dead, and all the science we see in the world today confirms and supports what God's Word has originally told us, that there was an original creation, that man sinned and brought death and suffering into this world that God had created. Real quick story, I was sitting in my living room, being a good husband, folding a basket of socks for my family. Does anybody else hate folding socks? Is that like a pain to anybody else? You would think it's like no big deal. Let's match it up, fold them up. Man, I couldn't stand socks. Towels, I do towels. Socks, I hate socks. I'm sitting there folding a basket of socks, and I threw this up on my Facebook page. I took a picture of my basket of socks, and I threw this up on my Facebook page. I said, does anyone else hate matching up socks? Here's what I put. Seriously, I have a hard time putting socks together, but evolutionists believe all the chemicals for life came together by chance. I don't have that kind of faith. I thought, seriously, I don't like matching up socks, but all the molecules for life could come together by chance with no intelligent design? That doesn't fit reality. That's absurd. That's never going to happen. So I've done this on my Facebook page, and it invites a very colorful conversation with many of my atheist friends on Facebook. And the conversation goes for a little while, and then one guy chimed in on the conversation. His name is Jason Pratt. He chimed in on the conversation saying, I agree, I'm a scientist, I agree that evolution is impossible. It could not happen. Boy, the atheists jumped on this guy. They said, you're an idiot. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that evolution really did take place. Take a wild guess at what Jason Pratt is. Just a wild guess. What do you think he does? He's a rocket scientist. He is a rocket scientist. So I had to write a blog about it. This is him inside one of the fuel cells of one of the satellites that he launched. He was a fighter pilot, went on to be an experimental test pilot. He's a stinking rocket scientist, had the opportunity to go be an astronaut, but really wanted to invest the time with his family. So he's now in charge of the launches for the Navy of their satellites that go up. He's invited me down many times. He's working right over here at the Cape. This is me and my wife when he invited us down to one of the satellites, watching it, checking it out as it's being built, as it's being developed before it goes up into space. And then I got to go watch this satellite be launched up into space. Just an incredible experience. But here, somebody jumped on him and said, look, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out evolution really happened. And he's going, I am a rocket scientist, and no, there's no way evolution happened. It's impossible. He's not the only one. I happen to have brought with me a list of other scientists that are rejecting the idea that Darwinian evolution is correct. If you go to dissentfromdarwin.org, dissentfromdarwin.org, you can download the PDF. It is page after page after page after page of scientists that are saying, I reject Darwinian evolution. I do not believe it is scientifically possible. These are not idiots. These are not guys who've never studied before. These are guys that know what they're talking about. They're in the field and they're saying there's no way random mutation and random chance, could actually produce what we have today. So thousands upon thousands of scientists. Now, are there a lot of scientists that do believe in evolution? Yes. My point is not to try to make an argument for majority opinion. That never gives us truth. The majority of people have thought a lot of things that were wrong through the years. The majority of scientists have been wrong over and over and over throughout history. Matter of fact, here's something interesting. When you study the history of science, when you realize what they taught as absolute scientific fact in the 1700s, by the 1800s, 90% of what they thought was true was proven wrong. From the 1800s to the 1900s, get this, what they thought was absolutely scientifically true in the 1800s, by the 1900s, 90% of it had been proven wrong. Science has a long history of being wrong. Do I believe that natural selection and mutations cause evolution? Absolutely not. Do I believe adaptation happens? Yes. But much of what evolution is based on, this idea of mutations and natural selection, it's already being proven wrong. The last 15 years they've been studying what's called epigenetics, showing that People and animals and plants adapt to their environment because their genetic information was designed, get that word, designed to adapt to the environment. It's kind of like a car that has both a heater and an air conditioner. It's designed for either climate, the hot or the cold. To say that, oh, well, you're using the heat, you adapted and evolved to use the heat. No, that was built into the design structure. And people and animals and plants are discovering, oh my goodness, their genetic information changes based on their environment. It's designed to adapt to the environment. This is going to throw out all the natural selection articles that have ever been written. It destroys the idea of natural selection. That was the satellite that went up. That was really cool. Now, I want to define science for us real quick, because a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what science really is. In its simplest terms, science is the word knowledge. That's all it is. Science is things that we know. Now, we use the scientific method to try to discern what we really know, because we want to see it, we want to test it, we want to demonstrate it. So we use the scientific method to try to figure out, what do we really know? What do we really have as truth? That's that. Second. PowerPoint. It's part of Microsoft Works, and doesn't always work, if you know what I mean. All right, so my scientist friend Jason Pratt, what science really is. So, science, systemized knowledge derived through observation and study. Things that we can know because we can see it, we can test it, and we can demonstrate. Now, I also want to define the word evolve. What does evolve mean? A simple definition of evolve would be develop gradually, especially from a simple to a more complex form. Evolve. To change gradually, to develop gradually from a simple to a complex form. I also went ahead and went to Berkeley University's website and grabbed their definition of evolved. It's a little bit longer, but I thought, hey, you guys are in college, I'll go give you the long definition. You can probably handle it. All right? Evolve. Biological evolution, simply put, is descent with modification. There's modification as we go throughout the generations. This definition encompasses small-scale evolution, or changes in gene frequency in a population from one generation to the next, and large-scale evolution. Notice they distinguish between small-scale evolution and large-scale evolution. This is where the entire debate really takes place, between small-scale evolution, large-scale evolution. They say large-scale evolution is the descent of different species from a common ancestor over many generations. Now, here's the problem. They're calling large-scale evolution, they're saying that's changing in species. Now, I would not call that large-scale evolution, because to go from a dog to a wolf has changed species. But that's still small-scale evolution. Large-scale evolution would be going from a whale to a cow. That's big-scale evolution. And they do believe that that happened. So large-scale evolution and small-scale evolution, they're not quite getting right here. Large-scale evolution would be much, much bigger than what they're claiming. Changing to a different species is not a big deal. That's adaptation. It's interesting, the Bible uses the word kind instead of species. You guys remember having to memorize Carl Linnaeus' system of classification, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species? The kind would be really where the family level is for the most part in the Bible. You will never, ever, ever see animals change kinds. Can we get different species? Sure, no big deal. That's adaptation. That's that epigenetics I was talking about, or man-made selection, where you get the poodle and things like that. It wouldn't survive in nature, but here we have it because we've bred it, we've developed it, okay? So that's evolution defined. Now, the word evolution, or the different fields of evolution are great. We've got one field of evolution called cosmic evolution. Cosmic evolution would be the origin of the origin of time, space, and matter. How did space, time, and matter come into existence? What's interesting is the scientific world is going, look, we know that all three of these and energy have to be in existence at the exact same time. You can't have space and time without matter. Otherwise, what would you put there? You can't have matter and space without time. Otherwise, when would you put it? And you can't have, which two did I forget? Time and matter without space. Otherwise, where would you put it? So you have to have all three in existence at the exact same time. The Bible answers this for us in 10 words. Anybody know the first verse of the Bible? In the beginning God created energy, the space, and the matter. He answers the space-time, matter, energy continuum in the very first sentence of the Bible. It's phenomenal. Cosmic evolution, though, would be the origin of time, space, and matter. Now, the very first law of thermodynamics tells us, and it's one of the most first and second laws of thermodynamics, one of the most well-established laws in science, matter cannot be created or destroyed. You cannot create and you cannot destroy matter. You can change it in form. If you studied science, just high school science, you've learned this. You can change it in form. I used to think I can destroy it, I can take it, and I can burn it. All I've done is transition. I've changed it into a different form. I've changed it to energy. That's all that's happened. I didn't destroy it. It still exists. Well, if matter cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed, and there's a lot of matter here, you have to ask the question, where did the matter come from? Some people say it doesn't matter. But anyway, I believe it does matter. Okay, where did all the matter come from? Who made all this stuff? You can go with an evolutionary worldview that says it popped into existence all by itself by random chance with no reason. Or you can say that makes no sense. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, just like the Bible says. I believe the Bible fits with what the observable science is. Matter can't be created or destroyed. It would take something outside of matter to create matter. God is not inside of matter. He is not confined to matter. He is a spirit. It fits with the creation worldview. I gotta skip that. That was a good video then. All right. Now here's what's interesting. Prior to 1960, most scientists believe in what's known as the steady state theory. The steady state theory said that the universe is eternal. It's always existed. Well, they kept finding science that disproved the steady state theory, but they wanted to hold on to it anyway. Albert Einstein, when he was developing his theories of relativity, general relativity, he actually fudged his equations to account for a steady state, an eternal universe. Later on in life, he said, that was my biggest blunder. I should have followed the science where it led. And the science was leading to a finite beginning, a starting point for the universe. What they were worried about, though, is, this is going to sound a lot like Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So instead, they developed what's known as the Big Bang model to say, well, maybe it came into existence all by itself, instantaneously, and nobody did it. Now, that doesn't fit the science that we see, but that's the rescuing device they came up with to keep God out of science. That's what they began to believe. Einstein, it's kind of funny, Einstein said, only two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the former. He used to believe that the universe was infinite. Later they discovered the universe is not infinite. He said, my equations show that the universe should be expanding. That's what the numbers are showing. The universe looks like it's being stretched out. Come to find out, that's exactly what was happening. The universe was being stretched out. So if you go backwards in time, there was a finite point in time in which the universe began. So when he was developing these rules in general relativity, he predicted the expanding universe. It went against the steady state model. So he fudged his equations and he said, man, I never, ever should have done that. I should have followed the science, even though it continued to point to God's word. It continued to point to the Bible. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now here's something interesting. David Berlinski is a Jewish philosopher. He is not a believer, not a Christian. And David Berlinski said, the point is, the phrase, let there be light from Genesis, is as consistent with the data as anything else. Incredibly consistent. The fact that God said, let there be light. Some people say, hey, the Bible's not a science book. I know it's not. But when it speaks of things of science, it is accurate every single time. Let there be light is consistent with all the scientific data that we're observing today. Oh, they also noticed, just remember this, they found that the universe was expanding. And it's interesting, and everywhere we look today, we see what's called the red shift. the longer wavelength of light, the longest wavelength is red. We're seeing this red shift in every single direction, no matter where we look. It looks like we're at the center, and everywhere is being stretched out from here. And it's so fascinating that I believe it's 14 times in the Bible, God said He stretched out the heavens as a curtain. He stretched out the heavens as a tent to dwell in. So we're seeing this red shift, and the Bible says God stretched out the heaven. Once again, the science agrees with or goes along with this concept that the Bible talks about, that God stretched out the heavens. So you got cosmic evolution, you got chemical evolution, all the elements that we have today. Any of you had to study and memorize the periodic table of elements? Did you guys have to do that? Did you forget them right after you took the quiz, like I did? Kind of, yeah. Get them down, get right on the quiz, and then out of your mind forever. I know. So you got this periodic table of elements. I think it's hydrogen and helium are the most basic and the most common. And it's interesting that some people are trying to petition the scientific community to change the two most common to hydrogen and stupidity, just because of the world they live in. It seems to be really, really common. Chemical evolution would be the origin of all the elements that we have today, the whole periodic table. How do you start with hydrogen and helium and evolve all the other elements in the periodic table of elements? We can't do it now with our intelligence. We cannot intelligently take hydrogen and helium and produce all the elements that we have today. Yet you want me to believe that happened by random chance over time, accidentally? I don't have that kind of faith. There's no way. Plus, you can't. People say, well, fusion happens in stars. And so fusion allows us to create the more dense elements. Well, hold it. Stars are made out of the more dense elements. So you got a chicken and an egg problem. Which one came first? The stars that produce the fusion to make the heavy elements, or the heavy elements to make the stars to create the fusion? You got a real problem here in the evolutionary worldview. You can never ever get past this chicken and egg problem of how the fusion took place. You've got stellar and planetary evolution, how all the stars and the planets form. This one for me, just looking up at the heavens, especially at night when you can see the stars, looking up at the heavens and looking at the stars, this one for me destroys any concept of an evolutionary worldview. Do you know how many stars they've calculated are in the universe? It's mind-blowing. You've got about between 100 and 200 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. You go on from that, and they admit, though, they don't know how any one star formed. We've never, ever seen a star form. They say, oh yeah, stars form all the time. We think one might be forming right out there. We think one might be forming. They've never observed a star form. What is science? Science is knowledge that we can see, test, and demonstrate. Have we ever seen a star form? Not once. You're welcome to say, I think a star is forming out there. Matter of fact, that's what they say. Look at this. They put it in major magazines. Evidence for recent star formation seen at Milky Way Center. We've got evidence. You open the article, what does the article begin with? So the headline is, we've got evidence. What does the article begin with? First sentence, stars could be forming. Not they are, it's that they could be. And I get it. You got these science writers, they got to make something of the science, and they got to make it interesting. The scientists themselves that are studying it are not going to go that far and use a lot of the hyperbole, but you'll hear hyperbole in science writing all the time. Could be, maybe, could have, possibly. That's not science. Science is what we can see, test, and demonstrate. We don't see stars forming. And how fast would you have to form stars to get the number of stars we can see in the universe today, or that we think are in the universe today? You study the universe today, and I know you can't see this picture, but the Hubble telescope, you can Google this one, the Hubble telescope did an image of deep space. They wanted to see how many stars were in a speck of the sky the size of a grain of sand held at arm's length. They had the Hubble telescope zoom all the way in on that little bitty speck of the sky. They left the shutter on the camera open for 11 days, an 11-day exposure. So they thought in that little bitty speck there were no stars at all. When they got the image back, there were more stars than they could count in that little bitty speck of the sky. And if you could see it, if you want to see it afterwards, you look what looks like little bitty dots. They go, no, those aren't stars. Those are galaxies. Those are billions of stars each. That's what those are. It has been estimated by scientists that there are enough stars on Earth that every single person could own 11 trillion of them. You can have 11 trillion of your own stars. Go name them, have fun, okay? You're going to be there a while, by the way. 11, that means they calculate that in the whole universe, there are approximately 70 sextillion stars. That's the number 70 followed by 21 zeros. Now do the math with me here. Okay, I'll do the math because this is way too complicated to do in your head, okay? If you had 70 sextillion stars, and you formed all of those stars in just 13.4 billion years, the Big Bang produced all that 13.4 billion years, all these stars forming, how fast would you have to form stars in order to get 70 sextillion in just 13.4 billion years? Here's the math for you. You'd have to be producing 14,300,000,000 a day, 596 million an hour, almost 10 million a minute, or 165,000 stars per second.
But isn't that taken on the basis that only one star can be formed at a time instead of all at once, as is theory?
What I'm saying is you'd have to form 165,000 per second for 13.4 billion years. All over the universe. That's what has to happen. No matter where it happens, they can happen simultaneously, but the number you come up with is 165,000 per second for 13.4 billion years straight to get the number of stars we have in our universe. Now, people are welcome to believe that that happened. I don't have that kind of faith. We do not see stars forming. We certainly don't see them forming at the rate of 165,000 every second. 165,000, 165,000, 165,000. We're not seeing that. This to me is great evidence that what God's Word says is true. He's the one who created the stars and put them into existence. It would take an all-powerful God to create 70 sextillion stars. And He says the heavens are there so that you and I will look up and say, oh my goodness, God, you are amazing. We are nothing compared to your glory. That's why the heavens are there. David, the psalmist, the king, he didn't even have a telescope, and he would look up and he would say, the heavens are declaring the glory of God. This is a majestic world we live in. It's awesome. It's awe-inspiring. And the more we learn about science, the more we see the genius of God. To say that we can look at science and it proves or it shows us that things happen by accident is giving the finger to God. It's saying, I'm not gonna believe that you designed this. I mean, hey, if you don't want to believe somebody designed this building, that's fine, but it's absurd. It really is. So according to evolution, we should see 165,000 stars forming every second. Then you got organic evolution. This is the origin of life, called abiogenesis. I mean, many people that try to say, hey, evolution doesn't deal with abiogenesis. You have to deal with it if you're going to have a cohesive worldview. How did life originate? Where did it come from? We got a lot of life. You know, scientists have a hard time figuring out what life is anyway. I mean, if you took a frog, a perfectly healthy frog, let's take one that you're going to dissect. It's got all the parts, okay? But it's dead. Can you ever bring it back to life? You got all the systems are in place, all the cells are in place, everything's in place, but it's dead. Can you bring it back to life? Nope. Scientists have a hard time understanding what life is in the first place, let alone how it evolved all by itself. And to think that I watched Neil deGrasse Tyson get next to a pond of bubbling goo and say with a straight face, around 3 billion years ago, lightning struck something just like this and formed the first cells, is absurd. It's just silly. What do you think?
Do you believe the earth is flat?
No. Okay. No, it's definitely right. No doubt about it. All right. So organic evolution is the origin of life. Where did life come from? You got information inside of you. Where does that information come from? It has to come from a mind. Information must come from a mind. It does not develop all by itself. I know some of you hope that'll happen for your homework, and you're like, well, I didn't do it, so who knows, maybe it'll just... It doesn't work, does it? It has never written itself, it has never worked for you, and it's never worked in the history of the universe. Abiogenesis is life from non-living matter, and that has never, ever, 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 ever been observed. They did the famous Miller and Urey experiments, and the Miller and Urey experiments, They sent some gases through a reduced, what they call atmosphere, an atmosphere that didn't have oxygen, and sent it through this spark and kept sending it through this electrical current. And at the end of their experiment, they got some tar, some carboxylic acid, both of which are toxic to life. And then they filtered off some amino acids. Now, amino acids are the building blocks for life. The problem is you have to have all left-handed amino acids for life. They have right-handed and left-handed, which means in what they produced, every fifth amino acid was toxic to life. So they made a couple of amino acids and a whole bunch of things that are toxic to life. And what does the world say today? Guys, they made life in the lab. No, they didn't. They produced things that are toxic to life in the lab. They've never demonstrated how life can come from non-life. That's never been observed. Then you have macro, the big evolution. The big evolution isn't a change in species. It's a change in one kind of animal into a different kind of animal. Have we ever observed that happening? One kind of animal changing into another? Never. You say, oh yeah, we see it in the fossil record. That's not a direct observation. You can interpret it, say, I believe that's what that means, but you did not observe one animal changing into another kind of animal. If you remember, I don't know if you studied this, they did the fruit fly experiment. They thought, and the experiment on bacteria, and they on E. coli. And for the fruit fly experiment, they raised 80,000 generations of fruit flies, trying to get the fruit fly to evolve, trying to get it to change, to turn into something else. Man, they mutated it, they microwaved it, they nuked it, they did all kinds of stuff to try to get the fly to evolve to the next level of what's after the fly. After 80,000 generations and a whole bunch of really bad mutations, they said, you know what? We've concluded the fruit fly has evolved as far as it can go. I'm going, wait a minute, what about the conclusion that the fruit fly wasn't evolving in the first place? What about the concept that God designed it in the first place? Why can't you come to that conclusion? But instead they said the fruit fly has evolved as far as it can go. A friend of mine who lives in Georgia is actually surpassing, who's the guy who's done all the E. coli experiments? He was trying to raise, anyway, famous scientist doing all the E. coli experiments, trying to get E. coli to evolve. He was trying to get to 100,000 generations. My friend is actually going to beat him to 100,000 generations. And what he's showing is that the E. coli from 100,000 generations ago and the E. coli today are in essence the same. Now, can you get them to be resistant to certain citruses or certain things like that? Yes. But at the end of the day, what is it? It's still an E. coli bacteria. That's it. We don't today see macroevolution. We don't see one animal changing into another kind of animal. Then you got microevolution. Microevolution is the small changes. This one, I love. I agree with. We should teach this. This is adaptation. Do animals and plants adapt to their environment over time? Yes. Is that evolution? No, it's a design feature. It's like using the heater and the air conditioner in your car. It's not an evolutionary process. It's designed to do both of those. What we see is animals design and plants and people designed to adapt to their environment. That's what we really see. This is scientific. Microevolution is observable. You can see it. You can test it. It's scientific. The rest of those are outside the realm of science. They are not scientific. They have never been observed. You cannot repeat them, yet they're taught on this university as a scientific fact. That's my beef. That's my problem. I would rather they just be intellectually honest and say this is outside of science. This is a theory. They used to call evolution a theory. Now they're trying not to even call it a theory. They want to call it a scientific fact because they give examples of microevolution, which I agree with, which I say, no, it does not prove macroevolution. It does not prove abiogenesis. It does not prove chemical evolution or planetary evolution and stellar evolution or cosmic evolution, the origin of the universe to begin with, okay? Here's why evolution is dead. Number one, the science or the knowledge that we have from every field of science contradicts the theory of evolution. Every single field of science you look in, it contradicts the information they have, contradicts the evolution model. You look at evidence from really anywhere, astronomy, simply the number of stars that we have, and we're not seeing stars forming like that today, contradicts the idea of evolution. Biology, we've never seen life come from non-life. In biology, we see that animals produce the same kind of animal. That's consistent with the creation model, not the evolution model. In chemistry, we never see the evolution of elements. We don't see that. We can't do it. We can't force it to happen today. In archaeology, the science of archaeology, every single time we dig something up, it continues to confirm what God's Word has told us was the history of the world. For a while, they thought that King David was never really in this certain town. And last year, they came out, guess what? They found these coins from King David's time. And they're just like over and over and over. Archaeology is confirming everything that the Bible says over and over and over. Paleontology, the study of fossils, confirms over and over that God's Word is true. Every fossil you dig up out of the ground, if I started digging right here, we found a fossil and we unearthed it, we could learn a lot about that fossil. We could never know that it had any kids, whatever that animal was. And we know that it had to be fossilized because it got buried with mud and water. Dirt and rock, maybe mud. Fossils don't normally form. If, God forbid, a little bitty squirrel were to come in here and drop dead, bam, right there, okay? We got a dead squirrel right here. How long is it going to take that to turn into a fossil? Or is it going to turn into a fossil? It's not going to turn into, what if we were even better? What if we moved it over to the side right here and left it right there? Would it turn into a fossil then? No. What if we dug a little hole and buried it? Would it turn into a fossil? Possibly, but not likely. Because the animals are still going to come, eat it, or something's going to dig it up and eat it. It's most likely not going to turn into a fossil. Under normal, natural conditions, things don't fossilize. Yet we have trillions upon trillions of fossils. Now you could look at that and say, that proves that it's taken millions of years because it's very rare that it happens. Or you could look at that and you could say, no, this is great evidence that there really was a flood to create all these trillions of fossils. That's the one that fits the scientific evidence that we're looking at today. Paleontology over and over fits the Bible's interpretation and the science of the Bible. Another example, they find animals and plants. Oh, I don't have it in here. They find animals and plants that are buried in mass graves. Where in nature do we see animals all going to the same place to die? Other than in, what's the movie where the giraffes go to the dying hole? Madagascar. Other than Madagascar, where the giraffes go to the dying hole in a cartoon, where do animals all go to the same place to die and get turned into fossils? It doesn't happen. But we've got huge fossil graveyards all over the world, incredible evidence of the worldwide flood, the fact that God really did destroy the world. Computer science. Computer science is amazing. These things are designed. Let me ask you something. Let me ask you, pose it this way. What if I told you, I want you to explain the origin of this computer, but you're not allowed to appeal to anything outside of the computer? I want you to tell me how that computer formed and where it came from, but you can't give me anything outside of the computer. Could you do it? No, you couldn't. Because the origin of the computer, you have to step outside. The maker of the computer is not inside of his computer. He's not in there running around, changing the screen like Vanna White when I hit the buttons. That's not what's going on. The maker of the computer is outside of the computer. So too, science has been perverted to say you have to explain the origin of this universe within this universe. That's absurd. You could never do that. The origin of the universe, you have to appeal to someone outside of the universe in order to find the maker and the creator of this universe. Physics, everything in physics, the laws themselves that we see today. According to evolution, all the laws evolved. They just came about. According to evolution, everything always changes. If everything's always changing, could we do physics? Could we do physics if everything is always evolving? What if the law of gravity changed from one day to the next? What if one day you just weigh 10, 15 pounds more than you did the day before? You're like, Eric, I do. Well, that's not gravity changing, okay? That's not physics. The laws have not changed. They're constant. From yesterday, today, and forever, they're constant. Why? Why are they constant? Not because of an evolutionary worldview that says things are always changing, but because the God of the Bible said, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. I have created this, and heaven and earth will not perish. He's the one who makes that claim. It's not going to change. That's why we can do science in the first place. That's why we can have physics in the first place. It fits what the Scripture tells us. geology, botany, zoology. We could go into every field of science and show this. And many scientists today, like I showed you in these sheets, many scientists today are leading in droves. I don't know if you guys saw, did you guys see the movie Expel No Intelligence Allowed with Ben Stein? Did anybody see that movie? All right, you guys missed out. It's online, I think, for free now. Expel No Intelligence Allowed with Ben Stein. A great film depicting, showing the problems when a professor, like if a professor at a university said, and he taught evolution, said, you know what, I'm going to reject the evolution worldview. I'm not going to teach it as a scientific fact anymore. What would happen to him here at this university, at this college?
You get fired?
He'd get fired, wouldn't he? Yeah. If you have a change of mind about the religious dogma, you get fired. Is that right or is that wrong? It's wrong. Why can't he teach that he doesn't believe in evolution anymore?
Because it's religion.
Because evolution is a religion. You're exactly right. Because no, just denying evolution. There are scientists that have come out that just say, well, I'll give you an example. This guy just came out, David Glertner. Here's what he said. This is just an interview. This is kind of more for your edification. He said just recently on an interview, this actually said this 3 years ago in an interview, the students know nothing about art, they know nothing about history, they know nothing about philosophy, and because they have been raised as not even atheists, they don't raise to the level of atheists. Insofar as they've never thought about the existence or non-existence of God. It has never occurred to them. They know nothing about the Bible. David Glertner just this last month came out. He's an artist, a philosopher, a mathematician, and he came out and he said, you know what? I do not buy Darwinian evolution anymore. I cannot hold to it. Here's what he said. Yale's David Glertner's Darwin's Doubt is one of the most important books in a generation. And this is on the Evolution News website. Here's what they say. Let's see here. Famed Yale professor has publicly renounced his belief in Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, calling it a beautiful idea that has been effectively disproven.
Do you know how many preachers are agnostic?
How many preachers are agnostic? It's kind of irrelevant to what I'm talking about, but there are a handful of preachers that are agnostic, and they're wrong. Majority doesn't determine right and wrong. When I handed you this sheet, I said majority does not determine right and wrong. That's not what I'm going with. I'm just pointing out there are more and more professors that are willing to come out of the closet and say, I do not accept Darwinian evolution. It cannot explain the origin of the species. He said the origin of the species is exactly what Darwin cannot explain. Random mutations and natural selection will never be able to explain Darwinian evolution, which is what they want you to believe. Whew! All right, well, that is a little bit. I could go on and on and on about why evolution is dead. It's not holding up, and I want to take some time for some questions and answers from you guys. So, we have a lot of science, a lot of facts, a lot of information. How every field of science denies evolution and supports the Bible. Questions? Ben. Who created God? Interesting question. How many of you have ever been asked or wondered that question yourself? Who created God? You ever wondered that or been asked that? Yeah. The question has a built-in assumption to it. When I ask the question, who created God? What am I assuming?
God exists. Yeah, God exists.
Okay, God exists. What else? Who created God? It's real simple. What's the big assumption in that question?
What is God?
No, that's not the assumption.
No, but that's what the question.
That God was created. Who created God assumes God was created. So the very question is flawed at the beginning. It assumes God was created. The Bible describes God as the one who was not created. He did not have a beginning. Matter of fact, it's said, even in scientific circles, everything which begins to exist has a beginning. God never began to exist. He is the one who is eternal. He is the one who is infinite. He is not finite like you and I. So many people have a problem with God because they treat God no different than you or I. And that's the problem. They try to bring God down and make him like man. And that is the problem. We are made in his image. We're not to turn around and try to make him in our image. God was never created. So the question, who created God, assumes something about God that's not true. If I asked you guys a question, hey, when did you stop beating your girlfriend?
Like it says in the Bible,
What?
beat your kids and
It
beat
does
your
not
wife.
say that.
It
Well,
does
when
say
I
that.
said that, it has a built-in assumption, doesn't it? It assumes you're beating your girlfriend. The question assumes something that may not be true. Who created God assumes God was created. That's the assumption that's not true. All right, next question. Did you have one?
That's it. So going back to you had just let me make sure I clarify your position here. Was that the universe is so vast, right? We have so many stars, so many galaxies and all this. Is that correct?
I did mention the number of stars that we
Wait,
have
is that your
and how the number of stars, the 76 billion stars, if they formed in 13.4 billion years, would have to form at the rate of 165,000 per second. That was my point.
I'm trying to say, if that's your position, if you acknowledge that the universe is that vast, I want you to explain to these people how we could possibly, how it makes any sense that we would have a personal relationship with a spiritual entity that transcends reality, that is the creative source of the entire universe. I want you to explain to these people.
Great question. How could an all-powerful, all-knowing God have a relationship with mankind? He chooses to. That is the epitome of love. You know what? Why is a great question. Because do we deserve His love?
Space dust.
Do we deserve His goodness? Do we deserve that? Absolutely not. This tells us a lot about the love of a creator. So you're on the right track asking that question. When you find out why He said, I want a relationship with you, despite the fact that you've done wrong, despite the fact that you don't love me, when you find out the fact that, man, the creator of the universe loves you, your mind is going to be blown. And you're like, wow, the God who created all that created me. Now, why did He create us, and why does He want a relationship with us? That's another great question. I'll ask that one. The reason He wants a relationship with us is because you can't, God, the creator, created everything for His own glory. You say, well, that's kind of selfish. No. When you're the top, when you're the supreme being, you can't be stuck on anybody else's glory. There's nobody above you. You have to be stuck on your own glory. It's actually a good thing. And God created you and me and said, hey, I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to make you. But I just want you to know that I love you. I love you so much that I'm going to send my Son to live as a human being, die the death of the cross, and suffer the punishment so that His blood can restore the relationship that you and I need to have. God, the loving creator of the universe, stepped into His creation to demonstrate what real love is. And only in the Christian worldview and with the God of the Bible will you discover what true love is. If you reject that, good luck in the world, because it is nothing but survival of the fittest. And I'm being serious. It's been said evolution is a great velocity for boys 18 to 25 years old. When you're at the top of the game, it's great. Yeah, it's great. Outside of that, it's not. So why did God do that? Why did God create us for His glory? I don't get any more
So
glory.
it makes sense because He did it. That's what you're saying. It makes sense because He did it.
Well, He did it, and He revealed to us that He did it. He recorded for us how
So why
He did
does
it.
it make sense, though?
I'll tell you this. God's love for humankind does not make sense. That's what makes it so incredible. Why would God love you? Why would God love me? I am a
That's my
sinner.
question.
Why would God do that? And it's because He's demonstrating a love that is way beyond you and I. It's been said this before, and I think this is true. When the king sends what's most precious to him to die for the subjects, that says a lot about the king, not the subjects. I'm going to say that again.
Just a weekend, you got it.
When the king gives what's most precious to him for the subjects, that says a lot about the king, not the subjects. To accuse it of just being a weekend does not at all diminish the pain, the sorrow, and the suffering that He went through. Not in 1 second does it diminish that. Okay, you had a question and she had a question. I'll go ahead and
Okay. My first one is, you said that God is outside the universe and its creation. How do you know it's just God out there? Like, taking in all of your arguments is true, how do you know it's just God?
Okay, number one, it's not just God. There are also other spiritual beings that God created. It's
Right,
called
but He
the
created all
counsel
those,
of
but
God.
how do
He
you know
created
that there's
the
other beings
angelic,
of His equal out there that we don't have
not
access
of His equal. There's none of His equal out there. Matter of fact, that's what a lot of the Old Testament is about other people saying, oh, I'm going to follow this God. I'm going to follow that God. And what do we see God doing when they try to give glory to another God? He shuts that down and says, just so you know, there is none else. There is none like me.
Then why is
So
our-
I'm glad you're contemplating that He does exist. I think that's
Then
good.
why is the Christian and Islamic world and the Jewish world all centered around the Mediterranean? What about India? What about China? There are so many vastly different religions. How can that work if He's doing that for every human?
Why doesn't He stop? Why do you stop? Why do you stop keeping people from believing in other gods?
Yeah, so God gives people the freedom. He gives them the freedom to choose. Otherwise, we're just robots. You don't get as much glory. If I force my son when I get home tonight at around 10:30 or 11 o'clock, if I wake him up after being gone for a whole week and I say, hey, give me a hug. And he says, okay, gives me a hug. Is that very fulfilling? No. What if I wake him up and say, hey buddy, I made it back. I'm here. He goes, oh man, Dad. And he gives me a hug. Is that fulfilling? Absolutely.
So why do we need heaven
And
and hell?
what your Heavenly Father is looking for, what your Heavenly Father is looking for is you to say, wow, God, you created all this and you're giving me an opportunity yet again to hear the truth. God, thank you for being patient with me. And I'm going to choose to love you despite my sin. Thank you for loving me. You've lavished it on me. I'm gonna submit and I'm going to love you. That's what he's looking for, and that's why. That's why. Let me go to her first, and then you can ask me. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the flood.
The flood?
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of ancient civilizations have this theory of the flood. Like, if you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the heroes in it did something a lot like Moses. So, how does the proof of, like, this evidence of the flood prove Christianity and not all these other ancient civilizations?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great question. You do have, now first of all, I think it's awesome that you guys are admitting there are a bunch of evidences of a flood. Tons and
It's
tons
that
and tons.
Christianity was copied, sir.
Over
Christianity
300
was
cultures.
copied.
Okay. Over 300 cultures around the world tell the story of a flood. A majority of them talk about a man who put his family and animals on a boat, and it was a worldwide flood. They were on it for over a year, and then it went down and they repopulated the world. Now, I believe that in itself, the fact that there are over 300 of them around the world, lends incredible credence to the truth that this really happened, and that story was passed on, and at the Tower of Babel, when God confused the languages, boom, you had this same central story go to all the different cultures and all the different continents of the world. That to me goes, guys, if you can see that there are over 300 around the world, and that they all have all these similarities, and you want to deny that they all came from the same place, the original flood, that's kind of hard. To say, agree. Oh, no, that's the wrong conclusion. There wasn't really a flood. I go, there was. Now, how do we know that the Bible is the truth? Now, number one, I take it from two perspectives. Number one, and I did this yesterday with some students, without God's revelation of mankind, you can't have knowledge. So I believe God supernaturally revealed through His Word the truth of the history of the world. God gave that to us, and it's supernatural revelation. That's why you can have 40 different guys write over a period of 1,500 years, 66 different books, and have no internal contradictions. Unbelievable what they've done. No, the contradictions that you're pointing out might be spelling differences, things like that. But nothing. The idea that God created the heavens and the earth, there was a flood, New Testament, Old Testament writers all went back to this. You could not get 40 people today to sit in a room and write something about a subject without having contradictions. Here you have 40 people over 1,500 years write 66 different books without contradictions. That's miraculous. Then you have the prophecies in the Bible. The prophecies go back and they say, this is going to happen in the future. And sure enough, you look through history, whether it's Daniel or Isaiah, all these prophets said this is going to happen, and it happened. It came true. I mean, we're not talking general stuff, a guy might be somewhere. We're talking very specific prophecies that became fulfilled hundreds of years after they were prophesied. It is a miraculous book. So the first way I'd say is through the revelation of God, through His Word. Second, when we study these, what we find is that Moses did not copy Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is a copy of the original from Noah. That's when you study it out what you're really discovering. Moses recorded the accurate one, the one that has been passed down, and I believe supernaturally preserved. I say that because some people say, well, hey, have you ever played the telephone game? The telephone game is what we get when we look at some of these other cultures that have a flood legend. It's a little bit different than the original one. Now, the fact that 4,400 years later, it's still a guy on a boat with animals and his family, and they repopulate the world, that's really good. But, because it would be way more distorted based on the telephone game. But what we have is way better. We have, from the beginning of the telephone game all the way to the end of the telephone game, we have those two people coming together and talking, and God preserving His Word. The Dead Sea Scrolls prove this. They found passages from every single Old Testament book of the Bible in the Dead Sea Scrolls, just discovered about a couple decades ago, about 40 years ago. They discovered these scrolls in a cave. They open them up and they're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. The entire book of Isaiah was discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, these have been there since around 2 to 300 BC, 2 to 300 years before Christ. When they compare what we have today for Isaiah and compare it to the telephone game all the way back when it was written down 2 to 300 years before Christ, guess how different it is? Not different at all. God miraculously preserved His Word. Every single Old Testament book other than Esther and the entire book of Isaiah has been found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And when they compare it to what we have today, it's the same. It's been miraculously preserved. You're welcome to say, well, I'm still going to believe in the telephone game, but I'm just telling you, you're doing that out of ignorance, and you're doing that in order to reject the truth. Question?
Yeah, so I think you and I agree on a whole lot of things about life, reality, morals, ethics, all those things, regardless of our faith, because we share that with other people of different faith traditions as well. As an atheist, I think you and I agree on a great number of things, but I haven't heard very many of them today. A correction first. Whales and cows are cousins, not descendants and ancestors, in the same way that humans and monkeys and chimpanzees and other apes are cousins, not
Do you have
descendants of one
any
another.
testable, observable, scientific evidence for that?
I'll present as much as you did today, right now.
Are you going to give me stuff in the fossil record, or can we actually
I'll
see
give you
that?
as much information. I'll give you as much evidence as you did for your claim today, right now. That's it.
So you don't have any evidence. Thank you very much.
Right, you bet.
Thank you.
It's convenient that you agree with all the science that agrees with your perspective, but then when it starts to diverge is when you start to challenge, straw man, and do other things to discount that. Science rejects a lot of the same old BS science that happened a couple hundred years ago that you pointed out as well. Many things that you pointed out, science has said they're no good. You're using those things to prop up
Can
the
you give me an
science.
example of one that I used that's
Yeah,
no longer
the
used?
embryonic studies that were done and the comparisons
Those were in
to evolution.
textbooks in 2015.
It doesn't matter.
Hey, whoa. You cannot tell me you use something that they don't use anymore, and then I say they're still using it, and you say that doesn't matter.
No, you said they were in a textbook. You didn't say they were still using it.
They are
Hold on
still
a minute.
using it
Hold on a
in the
minute.
textbooks as evidence of embryonic development. Yes, that is still in textbooks today.
Heckle's thing, the problem wasn't that it's not ontologically recapitulates biology. That's not the problem. The problem, when he drew it, he exaggerated the details, but
Right.
they're there.
They are still
The
teaching the
problem
concept
was
that the
when you
human
do it.
embryo goes through the stages of evolution in development. That is still in textbooks, and it's a lie. It's not true scientifically. Those folds of skin, no matter how big you draw them, those folds of skin develop into be parts of the ear and parts of the throat. They have nothing to do with gill slits, like he was saying, and like some textbooks still stay today. Do you have any other examples of something I use that is outdated, not true? That one is still true.
No, I can't
Okay,
be
thank
put on
you.
the spot
Thank you.
any more than you can on the fly. Okay, you agree with that, right?
On the
That I
fly.
can't be put on the spot any more than you can on the fly like that, right? I mean,
Well,
for me
you
to
gave
dispute all
you gave the accusation.
I just gave you the example.
What you're giving, well, here's your accusation. Your accusation is you're giving evidence that we know has been outdated. I say, give me one. You say this one. I say, wait a minute, they're still using that. You have another one. Any of the others that I went through, any of the other information I went through that you say is outdated.
If I had a copy of your slides before we sat down, yes, but I didn't write notes fast
All right.
enough.
So
Okay,
you don't
you
count.
can't fault
No.
me and my argument for not being able to respond to you on the fly. That
You
is how,
made the
that's
accusation.
that's how you bully and ambush. And this isn't fair.
This is not
Makes
going
it
in.
really
When
easy.
you say, hey, Eric, you use scientific information that's outdated, and I say, could you give me, I'll go back through them. I'll scroll through them right here. You tell me which piece of science I use that's outdated. You gave me one,
There's no
and it's
science
not
there.
outdated.
I want
because
this-
you're lying.
I would love for this to remain engaging, right?
I would too.
So let's
Right
just
now
move
you're
on.
lying to
I will-
everybody
I'll,
saying.
I'll be happy to discuss this on film afterwards, okay? But let's do this right now. All right?
You got another question?
I do. I have a question.
No evidence against what I presented.
Ambush and
being,
He can give you an entire presentation of evidence, he just said that.
So
You're throwing up straw men because it makes it easy for you to attack him. He's got all the evidence
I
and
think
you've got none.
everybody can understand. I'm asking for evidence. He's saying I can't give it to you right now. I'm saying that's fine.
you haven't
But
given us
don't-
evidence either.
What did I just spend? 45 minutes
Making
talking
claims.
about
You spent 45
scientific
minutes
evidence
lying.
after scientific
Lying.
evidence after
You
scientific
said a whole
evidence.
bunch of stuff.
All right.
You didn't even have a citation in there.
What's your
I know that when you invoke magic and God, anything is possible. but how does the light from the stars travel from the distance that it is, and I hope we agree that it is, in less time than it took to create the universe in your model?
But we got an even bigger problem, bigger issue.
No, I want to stick with this one, and then we can get to the
I
bigger
know,
one.
about the light, we've got an even bigger issue.
All right, because the light takes longer to
We
travel
don't need
than
the
the
light.
existence.
We don't need the light to get there by the end of the creation week. We got to get in there by the end of that same day.
I'm talking about the stars we see now.
I know, the stars that we see now that are
How does
billions
the
of
light
light
get
years
here?
away.
Right. How does it
Here's
get
the
here?
argument. The stars are billions of light years away, therefore it would have taken billions of years for the light to get here. The assumption in that is that a light year is an amount of time. A light year is not an amount of time. A light year is not an amount of time. Surely you know about science.
Yes, it's distance, but
It's
that's not the
distance.
point.
So it's a distance. So the
How does
question
it
is,
get that far
how
in
did
that
light
time?
go that distance in that amount of time? I have no problem saying, number one, the entire creation was miraculous.
So it's magic.
No. A miracle is not the same as
Miracles
what you
when
call
something
as
happens, it
magic.
cannot happen. By definition, it can't happen.
A miracle
You're saying it cannot happen.
is something that is done to suspend the laws of nature.
Can't they be suspended?
Can the creator who made them do that? Yes.
Cop out, sir.
That's not a cop-out. That's consistent with the logic of Christianity.
You just
Could
said-
the creator who created the heavens and the earth suspend a law that he created? Can he bring somebody back to life? Yep, he did it on multiple occasions.
Just snap
So
like that,
the
right?
question is, how did the light travel that distance? That distance does not mean time, especially when now we know that light is affected by gravity, time is affected by gravity. I would give you this, if you don't believe that, I mean, that's basic physics right there, that time and light are affected by gravity. That's just,
It brings it down to
that's general
6,000
stuff.
years. It brings it down to 6,000
I would
years.
say it like this, there's about 5 different models out there. Let me give you one of them. One model is that because time is also affected by gravity and light is affected by gravity, that the star that we see out there that's 10 billion light years away is 10 billion years old in its time, and that's the same as 6,000 years in our time.
So time is
Now,
not
I know
consistent.
it's not magic. If I said, when you send an astronaut up with an atomic clock, and he comes back, and that clock is different than the clock down here, and it's experienced more time than the clock down here.
Your misunderstanding of this is the same as your misunderstanding
No, listen,
of macroevolution.
it's different. That's not magic. That's
It's
science.
misunderstanding.
It's not misunderstanding.
6,000 years cannot become 14
Is
billion.
science for a dead person
You-
raised to life?
You're not understanding the reality of what I'm saying in this model. Time and light are affected by gravity.
Not to that exponent, though. There's no
How do you
way.
know that? We've never gone out there to check it out. We don't
You're
know.
the one making
what
the
it could
claim.
be.
I'm telling you you're
I'm
full
not
of shit.
I'm not saying that is the case.
You're guessing that might be the case,
The
right?
creator of the universe
don't know?
could have put the light into existence right away. That's easy. He made the earth out of nothing.
Right.
Putting light in place, no
So you
big
can
deal.
explain anything by just
Actually-
invoking your God.
No, what's incredible is God made the light before he made the source for the light. That's even more amazing.
He made the light after he made day and night, which is amazing miracle
No, he
in
didn't.
Genesis.
And God said, let there be light. No, he doesn't. Look it up. Read it. You need to reread it. God said, let there be light. After he said that, he said the evening and morning were one day. He made light before he even made a source. You can have light without a source. That does happen. So, like they send a
Of course,
laser.
because the moon
up
isn't
there.
light in the Bible.
No, they send a laser up and bounce it off a mirror on the moon. When the laser goes up, they turn the laser on, turn it off. The light waves, the laser waves are still going up, bouncing. They're still in existence without the source being powered. You can have light without a source. So the argument that you cannot have lights in place, or that the light from the stars had to take billions of years, isn't a good argument. It doesn't fit. Next question. Anybody else? We're passionate about this. Hey, can I answer that? Well, you guys think of another question. Do you know why we're so passionate about this? Because what you believe determines how you behave. And if you believe that this is just a random chance world, that there is no real ultimate purpose, which is what you said to me yesterday. Ultimately, you said yesterday, ultimately, the big picture, I agree, there is no purpose. Purpose is whatever you make for yourself.
That's it.
If purpose is
That's it,
whatever
brother.
you make for yourself, then you get to decide what you want to believe and what your purpose is.
What your reason
and,
is.
and they get to decide what their purpose is. And here's the deal. What do you do when your purpose interferes with his purpose? What if I decide my purpose is to gain all the wealth I can, and I'm going to do that by robbing other people?
Then you invoke God and you win.
No, not at all. God's the one who says, do not do that. Do not steal. It's hard to sit there and watch you. Everybody's seeing it. You twist things to make it sound one way, and you're saying the exact opposite of what the Bible says. It's absurdity. Only if you have an absolute, the God of the Bible, can you get absolute moral laws. Can you get purpose? What is the purpose of creation is true? You guys were created to be here and be a light and give glory to God. To live your life in a way that gives God glory. That says, hey, I'm going to do what's right, not because I'm forced to, but because I want to. Because a loving God created me. And He's given me a desire for righteousness and holiness. And I'm going to love other people, not because they deserve it,
That's
but
the right
because
reason.
God. No, because
That's the
God
right reason,
first
because
loved
they
me.
deserve it.
Because they deserve it?
You love people because they deserve it, and when they don't, then you don't love them. That's how it works.
No.
Yes.
God loved me when I was unlovable.
You can't.
In an evolutionary worldview, good, buddy. In an evolutionary worldview, why in the world would I go help somebody else? Why not?
Because you want to, and they need help.
Why not? Okay,
You
could
need
do that.
You need to be obedient to
But
help
you
people.
cannot say, why would it be wrong to take advantage of them? That's not necessarily
Because
wrong.
you don't want to be taken
They're in a
advantage
hard
of.
spot. Who cares?
I do. I care what you
Who?
want.
Okay, well, I don't care what you want.
I know this
How about
because the
that?
Bible doesn't tell you to.
No, the Bible doesn't. See,
No,
you-
Psalm
the
14:1
Bible
says,
says
"I'm evil and
to
corrupt."
love one another
The
as
Bible
God has
says,
loved you.
the Bible says, if any man hate not his father and his mother and his brother and sister and wife and children, and yea, his own life also. This is Jesus speaking. He
Yep.
cannot be my disciple.
Amen. Do you know what the word hate means?
That's hate.
Do you know what the word hate means?
What does it mean?
It means less love. If you don't put God's love above your love for your family, that literally the Greek word means less love. If you don't put God's love above your family, you're missing out. You're missing the
We've
point.
seen families destroyed because of that ideology.
No,
Every single day.
There are many people that have used that ideology wrong and said, I'm going to
Take what it
try to
says.
use it that way. It
Take
says
what
to
it says,
love less than you love God. In other words, God is the most important. He's the supreme being. He's the one who deserves
That's what he
all
thinks.
the honor, all
That's
the
what he
glory, all
thinks.
the
He's
praise.
wrong.
He's the supreme being.
That's what he said.
And I'd say you're about maybe 35 or 40 years shy of being an expert on that subject. Any other questions? We're going to talk about creation evolution, why evolution is not true, and about all the scientists that are rejecting it. And we said, no, we don't believe in this flat. Any other questions? Any other questions? What time is it? What time is it, by the way? Anybody know?
12:48.
14
I
million.
got 7 minutes. Did you have another thought?
Why don't we go back to the
Oh, what am I doing? We the crew club had a meeting today where they addressed why evolution. What was the title of it again? Why evolution is dead and it doesn't work. And so we went through the different types of evolution to show that microevolution, small evolution, adaptation, that's actually found in science. Epigenetics is doing amazing things in that. The Bible tells us that's exactly what He wants everything to do. He wants it to change and adapt to the environments that it goes to. But all the other types of evolution, the macroevolution, changing from one kind of animal to another, never been observed scientifically. Chemical evolution, the idea that we got all the elements from hydrogen and helium, never been observed. The other evolutions never did happen. Cosmic evolution, chemical evolution, stellar and planetary evolution, never happened. Elements. The element evolution or chemical evolution would be how did we get all the different elements on the periodic table of elements from hydrogen and helium? I say evolution cannot explain that. There had to be a creator that created these things. There's no way, you can't push past time. Hydrogen and helium from the Big Bang, right, with fusion, you can't get past time. So there's no way, they had to be created. I'm saying evolution is dead. It cannot account for what we see in the universe today. Yeah. Yes.
So does that mean that we have a limited gene pool on this earth? That every species extinct means that we're one step closer to an entire collapse that we can't prevent, period, because nothing can change?
I said things do change. Maybe you misheard me.
on a
I said
minor scale,
microevolution does change, but macroevolution, no, does not happen. You will never get a horse from a dog. It's not going to happen.
So with every species that we kill off as humans and that are left less on this earth means that we're going and shrinking the food web and stuff, all of that down to a point where it'll collapse.
If you use the word kind, you're exactly right. Species can be formed today. There are islands that have brand new species of animals that have either been carried by the wind or swam in the water over to that island, and now it's developed, it's adapted to that environment, and it's a brand new species. So speciation can happen. But will you get, if we killed all the lizards in the world today, would we have lizards? Nope, they'd be gone. You could never take what they think evolved into the lizard and evolve it back into the lizard. That will never, ever happen. Nope. Do you agree?
I don't think that it's a fair statement because it couldn't ever go back to what it was because it's not what it was. Every species that evolves breaks down into other subspecies that further divulge. You can't.
How far can they go? Can they ever turn into a different kind of animal? A different family?
Yeah.
A different family of animal? The family level?
Yes.
No. Give me an example. Give me an example of one.
Can they? Yes, they can.
Have we ever seen it happen?
No.
Okay,
Did you
so
see
that's
the-
not
Did you see
science.
God create the universe?
Science is things that we can see, test, and demonstrate. Thank you, David, for saying we've never observed the family kind producing a family kind. We've never observed that.
Never
Thank you.
observed
That is
God
fine.
either. Not a meaningful God either.
God is spirit. His creation is evidence of Him. Have you ever seen the builder for this building? Did you ever see the architect of this building? Would you use that same argument and say he may not exist? No, because it's absurd. Just like the argument I haven't seen God is absurd. Thank you for pointing that out. Any other? We got 1 minute. What was that?
I said there's tons of architects that do this.
I know, but if you've never seen this one, could you use that argument to say, I don't know that he exists?
There's multiple examples of buildings being created.
I know. And there's one creation.
And no other
That
example.
implies one creator. That's what that implies. That's my whole
We just
point.
have time for a prayer. If you want to close us in prayer.
Awesome. Hey guys, my name is Eric. I've been out here with crew today doing a little club meeting on why evolution is dead. It's been a very good conversation. We went through a ton of science, showing all the science that disproves evolution,
No science
and all the
whatsoever.
science that shows. How many of you think we went through a whole bunch of scientific facts that showed why evolution is dead? Does anybody? Did you guys hear those? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, couple hands.
Yes, okay. So we did go through a whole bunch of science that
Small
showed
minority.
evolution doesn't work and that creation works. Hey, my friend Carlos is right back here. If you're interested in joining the club, I recommend it. It's a brand new club on campus called Crew. And they're going to be doing meetings once a week where they talk about the reality of, does God exist? Did God create the heavens and the earth? Why are we here? What is the point of life? Why are you studying? And I promise you, you're going to learn that you're studying for a reason, rather than learning this idea that there is no truth. You can't have truth. Now go study and get good grades. And put the truth on the test. That doesn't make any sense. So you can see Carlos right over here. He's in the corner. If you want to join the Church Club, he's right here, all right? Hey guys, thanks so much for being here. Have a great day, all right? God bless.